Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Fellow Show. I'm your host, the Fellow KGB. You can follow me on Twitter at the Fellow KGB, and it is Wednesday evening, October 7th at 6 p.m. We're going to be just taking a look at the Thursday night football game between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Chicago Bears. We got a lot to look at tonight. We're going to be looking at snap counts. We're going to look at some stats from the last week, and then we're going to take a look at the practice reports. So if you're new to the Fantasy Fellow Show, go to thefantasyfellowship.com. I have my weekly start-sit charts. We're going to be looking at that here. So I kind of just rank each player as best that I would start them in fantasy in terms of quarterback 1, 2, and so on. So we're going to start with the away team, Tampa Bay. Now, I have Tom Brady here as a quarterback 2, and I'm actually kind of nervous about this game because I guess below the charts here, I have fantasy points allowed to each position. So this game is going to be a really good defensive battle. You see the Buccaneers are allowing the third least amount of points here, only 14.9, so that's 15 points a game to the quarterback. And the Bears are even doing better. So the Bears are allowing not even 12 points per game to the quarterbacks. So this is something to watch. I think both quarterbacks might struggle in this one. And then if we look at the practice reports here, you're going to see Leonard Fournette's listed as doubtful. Chris Godwin's already been ruled out. Receiver Justin Watson out. LaShawn McCoy out. And Tampa Bay just lost O.J. Howard last week for the season. So who is Tampa Bay working with? Is Tom Brady going to have a healthy cast of players? I really don't think so. Here's the practice reports from the last couple days here. So we already said Evans out, Fournette out, Godwin out. Gronkowski looks like he was limited, but he practiced today, so he's going to be good to go. LaShawn McCoy out. And then the one that I'm keeping an eye on here is Scottie Miller. He was questionable with a hip right now, but he didn't practice yesterday. He practiced today. No Godwin, no Justin Watson. So that leaves Scottie Miller as the number 2 receiver, probably logging most of the snaps. So Tom Brady, he's going to have limited weapons in this one tomorrow night. And we did highlight here that the Bears are allowing the second fewest points to the quarterback position in fantasy. And then if we look at the fantasy points allowed to running back, both teams are kind of middle of the road here. Tampa Bay is allowing about 24.7 and the Bears about 24 points. To the receiver position, Tampa Bay is allowing about 35 points just to the receivers. And then you see the Bears here allowing almost 29 points. So the Bears are very good against quarterbacks and opposing wide receivers. If we look at the tight ends here, Tampa Bay is allowing about 10.2 points to the tight ends, and the Bears about 13.5. So this is all in PPR. So this is all kind of coming up here that this game might not be a very high-scoring affair. I could see Tampa Bay, only scoring 2 touchdowns and a handful of field goals, and then maybe the Bears, the same thing, just a couple touchdowns and a couple field goals. So I'm maybe the first to 20 points in this game wins. So I'm kind of shy to get players into this game in my lineups. I think the must-starts of the group are going to be Mike Evans. Again, he's questionable right now, so I'm really hoping he can go. But if he's questionable and he's going to play, you're going to go ahead and lock him in there. I do have him as the wide receiver 1 just because of all these guys that are out. Mike Evans is going to get fed targets, so I feel like Mike Evans is a lock if he plays. And then you got to start Allen Robinson, of course. Tampa Bay does have a young secondary. They're playing better, but I think the oldest cornerback and safety is 24 years old, so it's a young secondary, and Nick Foles has shown that he's going to keep throwing to Allen Robinson no matter what. We saw the Bears really didn't do much last weekend against the Colts. They got the final touchdown to Robinson in the final minutes. So I'm feeling the best about Robinson and Mike Evans in this one. But we did talk about LaShawn McCoy being out. Leonard Fournette is doubtful. So I think the one name I have to add to this list is Keyshawn Vaughan. So Ronald Jones last weekend here. Let's take a look at this is my opportunity report. Every week I'll put snap counts and stats from last weekend. So this was Tampa Bay's game against the Chargers, where we see Ronald Jones log 64% of the snaps and Keyshawn Vaughan about 25. So again, no McCoy. Kenyon Barner is suspended. So maybe these 5 and these 4 snaps go to Vaughan. But anyways, Ronald Jones, 20 attempts, 111 rushing yards, and then the whopping 9 targets for 6 catches and 17 yards. So the output's not very good. But you see 20 rushing attempts and 9 targets. That's a lot of volume going to Ronald Jones. So I kind of feel like Ronald Jones can be your low-end RB2 flex kind of position. There was a couple times where he could have scored a touchdown last weekend. Keyshawn Vaughan's the one that caught the touchdown. But I mean, on the little route that Vaughn runs when he was kind of, right next to Tom Brady, and then he just runs to the out and catches the flat and gets in the touchdown. Ronald Jones ran like 3 or 4 of those routes. So there's a good chance Ronald Jones gets in on a touchdown on one of those plays. And if I remember correctly, in the first quarter, Brady attempted a pass from the 5-yard line. He had Ronald Jones next to him, and Ronald Jones just darts towards the corner of the end zone. Brady's throwing to him. He's wide open. He would have scored, but the ball was batted down at the line of scrimmage. So Ronald Jones if Tampa Bay is going to score, it's a good chance that it's Ronald Jones tomorrow night. But then I did like what I saw from Keyshawn Vaughan. He wasn't very effective in the running game, but I did like his receiving ability here. He kind of looked like a young LaShawn McCoy, just in the open field. So I like Keyshawn Vaughan. I don't know if I'm trusting him to start, but I'm definitely going to add him to the list of bench players here. I think you could probably add Keyshawn Vaughan to the end of your bench this weekend because if Fournette and LaShawn McCoy can continue to be banged up, we're going to see Keyshawn Vaughan take more of a role as the season goes on. So for running backs, I think Ronald Jones could be your low-end RB2. I'm interested in Keyshawn Vaughan. You'd have to be decimated at injuries to the running back spots to start him, but I think he could get some PPR play there. And he does have a chance at a touchdown. If Ronald Jones and Vaughn are the only 2 running backs, I think that, if they're going to get a touchdown, it's going to be one of the running backs or probably Evans or Gronk. So with that said, now that O.J. Howard's out of the picture for the season, you're going to have Rob Gronkowski and Cameron Brate step up into the majority of the snaps for tight ends. We see Rob Gronkowski last weekend. He logged 65 snaps, which is 86%. O.J. Howard had 28 snaps to Cameron Brate's 16. So we might see Cameron Brate somewhere, in a typical game, if they're going to play this many snaps, they're going to probably see him in the 40s, the low 40 ranges. I would expect him to be somewhere in the 40 to 50% targets. But O.J. Howard's leaving behind a pretty serviceable workload for fantasy purposes. 6 targets, 3 catches, 50 yards, and a touchdown last weekend. So I kind of like the idea of Rob Gronkowski and Cameron Brate both being useful for fantasy. It's been kind of a mess to begin with, and it's still going to be messy, where you're going to see Rob Gronkowski and Cameron Brate probably trade off touchdowns going forward. But if you're really hurting at tight end, you could do worse than Rob Gronkowski. So I think because he's on the field so much, only 3 targets last weekend, but that could flip now that some O.J. Howard targets are available. So I am definitely open to Rob Gronkowski as a tight end streamer. And then you got Scottie Miller here. If he plays, again, you look at these numbers here, the Bears are the 4th best against receivers in fantasy football. So I might move Scottie Miller down here to the bench. I'm going to probably add Keyshawn Vaughan to this list as well. But again, it's kind of like I said, this is going to be a very defensive game. It's probably going to be like a 20 to 14, 20 to 17, 20 to 13 kind of game where I'm only expecting the winning team to get a touchdown or 2. So Tom Brady has 5 touchdowns last weekend. I don't try to be chasing points. The evidence suggests that this is probably going to be a pretty low scoring game. So one of my favorite references that I like to use here is called Fantasy Football Today, just fftoday.com. And then if you hit the stats tab and you go down a little bit, you're going to see this is where I pull my information from for the fantasy points allowed to each position. So if you just click on quarterbacks here, you can also filter by your scoring preferences. I'm just going to use ESPN because I know that's 4-point passing touchdowns. But you're going to see Tampa Bay and the Bears way down here on the list. They are the best team, among the best teams in covering quarterback fantasy points. So let's just go ahead here and click on the Bears versus quarterbacks. And then this is going to show you who they played, how many points they've gotten. So week 1, Matthew Stafford got 16.2 points, almost 300 yards and a touchdown. Daniel Jones, week 2, just 7.7 points. He didn't score a touchdown. He was bottled up pretty well. Matt Ryan got a touchdown, 238 yards. Phillip Rivers, week 4, 1 touchdown, 190 yards. So no one's really dealing, touchdowns. They've only allowed 3 passing touchdowns all year. So, the over-under on Brady touchdowns is probably 1.5. I would be shocked if, he could get to 2 touchdowns. I could easily see that, but 3 touchdowns is probably not likely. So we're seeing a floor here of 7.7 points with Daniel Jones. I think Brady's better than that. But maybe we see a game here where it's somewhere in between Stafford and Matt Ryan, where he just gets the 1 touchdown, maybe 250 yards, or maybe 2 touchdowns and 200 yards. It could be a variance of things, but the ceiling's not very high for Tom Brady this weekend. I own Tom Brady in a Superflex league, and I'm probably not playing him. I'm probably going to use Justin Herbert instead of him on Monday Night Football against the Saints. So again, fantasy or FF Today, I like to use these guys a lot here. for all of their stats. Really, this is the fantasy points allowed stats. So back to the spread here. I guess let's just cover opportunity report last week real quick. We talked about the running back snaps. I expect Ronald Jones is going to get the ball the most. We'll see how much Keyshawn Vaughan can get in the passing game. Ronald Jones got a lot of targets last weekend, but the output only 6 catches for 17 yards. They were able to bottle him up right away. So maybe we see a split here between targets. Maybe Jones gets 6 and Keyshawn Vaughan 5 or 6. So I'm watching for this. And then at the receiver spot, I mean, they've already ruled out Justin Watson. Chris Godwin's already ruled out. So we're looking at these 4 receivers here for Tampa Bay. Mike Evans, maybe Scott Miller, and Tyler Johnson, the rookie, Jaden Mickens. It's going to get pretty thin pretty quickly here. And Justin Watson just led this team in snaps, and now he's officially out. So this looks like a Mike Evans heavy 10, 12 target kind of game. Scott Miller, if he can go, he's probably somewhere in that 7 to 8 target range. And Scottie Miller's played actually really well. He's got a really good deep ball chemistry with Tom Brady right now. And I guess the one player that Scott Miller reminds me of, especially because this is a Bruce Arians offense, that's going to be John Brown, back from the days in Arizona, where Scottie Miller can kind of stretch the defense, and he's just very good, in contested catch situations. So I like Scott Miller, but I'm probably not trusting him tomorrow night. Again, the receivers are going to be really thin, but I think it's all going to be about Ronald Jones and Keyshawn Vaughan splitting the ball. You're going to see Rob Gronkowski and Cameron Brate. Probably one of them will probably score a touchdown tomorrow. It's kind of Russian roulette, and then Mike Evans is going to easily be the target leading there. So I got a question here from Callie. Thank you for hanging out, man. So are the Bears D actually that good, though, or could it be the QB's offenses are that bad? So I think you just joined in, but I was just looking at so I use the website FF Today, and if you hit stats on their website, you're going to see fantasy points allowed to the position, and then I just clicked on quarterbacks here. And then if you scroll all the way down here, the Bears are allowing, not a lot of quarterback points. And then if you click on that link, it'll actually tell you who they played and how many points they've allowed. So the best quarterback I would say that they played is Matt Stafford or Matt Ryan. So Matt Stafford, week 1, this is without Kenny Galladay too. He put up 16.2 fantasy points. That's a 4-point passing touchdown score, but almost 300 yards and a touchdown. And then you got Matt Ryan here, probably the next best quarterback, just 238 yards and a touchdown. I think this was out Julio Jones too. So I'm thinking Tom Brady's probably in that 14 to 16 point range. The Bears haven't allowed more than 2 passing touchdowns in a game all season. So I could see Tom Brady putting up a higher score than 16 points. If anyone's going to catch a touchdown, it's going to be Mike Evans, and maybe Cameron Brate. But I do like Tampa Bay. I think they can be a tough team for the Bears. This is actually going to be a good test for us to watch the Bears and see how they are on national television. I mean, all these teams that they've played so far have their major flaws on offense. Indy can't really push the ball downfield. The Falcons were without Julio Jones in this game. Daniel Jones and the Giants are just kind of a mess. And then Matt Stafford without Kenny Galladay. So I'm kind of open to, like a 16 to 17 point game from Tom Brady. But for now, I think if you're in a 1 quarterback league, I think I'd be hesitant to get Tom Brady in there. There's guys that I like that might be available, like Teddy Bridgewater going up against Atlanta. I think that might be a really good pivot. There's a couple other good quarterback plays that I like, but for now, I'm just ranking Tom Brady as a quarterback too. And I don't know. I'm really only interested in Mike Evans, and then I think Ronald Jones can get the volume in this one. So those are the Bucs that I feel the best about. And then I guess on the Bears offense side, if we look at what the Bucs do on defense, again, they're pretty good against the quarterbacks. They're only allowing about 15 points per game. They're middle of the field against running backs, almost 25 points per game. The receiver position, again, middle of the road, about 35 points per game. And then the tight ends, they've been pretty good against tight ends with only about 10 points. So if we think about how the Bears offense is going to operate, you're going to see Nick Foles just target Allen Robinson a ton. I would assume Jimmy Graham gets a good amount of targets too, but he's really only an emergency tight end 1 streamer. If you have a guy that's on a bye week, or if you're like the TJ Hawkinson owner, maybe that's when Jimmy Graham can be kind of plugged in. But I have a feeling Tampa Bay's defense is going to match up pretty well against the Bears. So I'm feeling the best about Allen Robinson. You could start Nick Foles as a quarterback 2 in a super flex, but nothing more. And then David Montgomery. What do we do with David Montgomery? He's actually been a little bit frustrating lately because he's getting all the volume. He's getting all the pass catches and all the volume that you want here. So if we go back and look at my opportunity report for the Bears last week, I was really interested to see if they were going to use Cordero Patterson more, but they really didn't. So we see David Montgomery log 85% of the snaps, only 10 attempts, and 6 targets, but they were kind of losing the whole game, so they didn't really get to establish the run. But this 10 attempts for 27 yards is pretty concerning. The Colts are one of the best defenses against the run. But as we see here, Tampa Bay is not terrible against the run. So you're probably starting David Montgomery as your RB2. I do like the targets here. Again, I was watching for Cordero Patterson since Tariq Cohen's missing for the rest of the season, but they clearly don't have another running back that they want to use. So Montgomery's getting all the volume that you could want. So continue starting him as a running back too. If they get close to the end zone, he's got a good chance of falling in. And then looking at the receivers here, of course, Allen Robinson, he is the stud of the group, but I'm really watching Darnell Mooney here, the rookie from Tulane, and then Anthony Miller. I think Darnell Mooney has outsnapped Anthony Miller in 3 out of 4 games this year. So it's only by a few snaps, but they're keeping Darnell Mooney on the field as an outside receiver. So I really like that, especially for Dynasty League. So they even gave him a rushing attempt last weekend. It didn't go very well. But we see 9 targets. I think this was a career high game for Darnell Mooney. 9 targets, 5 catches, and 52 yards. So he's definitely a guy that if he's available in your Dynasty League, he should be scooped up because he could be a pretty nice piece for this offense for the next few years. And then you got Anthony Miller down here at 5 targets, 3 catches, 16 yards. We can't really trust Anthony Miller just yet. I love the talent, but I'm really not sure we can trust Nick Foles to successfully feed 2, 3, 4 receiving options in fantasy. And then, we're not really paying attention to Javon Wims or Ted Ginn, but I'm intrigued with Jimmy Graham just because, any tight end that's going to get 5 or 6 targets and has a really good red zone report, I'm interested in. So he got 5 targets, 4 catches for 33 yards. So that's 7.3 points, which is, for a tight end, the bar is so low. Where it's 7 to 8 points on a bad game is doable. So if Jimmy Graham gets a red zone touchdown, tomorrow night, I wouldn't be surprised. And then again, he's the clear leader in tight end snaps. So that's really much it from last week's game. I just want to check out the Bears practice reports real quick. They looked actually pretty healthy here. Only Deion Bush looks like he is out so far. And then another safety here, McManus. I think he's the 3rd string safety, but he's not practicing and doubtful. But otherwise, everybody else got full practices in. So you like what the Bears can do in terms of health. But again, I'm really nervous about this game. It's not going to have a lot of points. There's probably only going to be 2 or 3 touchdowns, maybe 4 at the most scored in this game. So I kind of already highlighted the guys that I think that it's going to be. But for me, like I said, I think Tom Brady, quarterback 2 in Superflex, it feels a little risky. But he's got if he gets 2 touchdowns, he'll be there. Ronald Jones has a good chance to score. Mike Evans has a good chance to score. And then one of the tight ends, Gronkowski or Cameron Braid, I'm interested in one of those guys for a streamer. And then on the Bears side of things, you got to plug in Allen Robinson. And then if anyone's going to score, it's going to be Montgomery or Jimmy Graham. So I think I'm probably just going to be enjoying this game from the sidelines. I don't really want to get too invested in this game. But again, if you have Evans, Allen Robinson, go ahead and start your studs. And then, I don't know, if you're a Ronald Jones owner, and we know the whole Leonard Fournette situation is tricky, but Leonard Fournette's probably going to be out in this game. So I feel inclined to say you almost have to start Ronald Jones any week that Leonard Fournette is out. He had 20 carries and 9 targets last weekend. So he's probably looking at, again, another 20 to 25 touches in this one. And he actually looked really, really good as a running back. I know people kind of make fun of his receiving ability and his pass catching, but from a pure running back standpoint, he was, the Chargers are no joke either. So he was kind of running in and through the Chargers defensive line. So I liked what I saw from him as a runner. And again, the Bears have a pretty tough defensive line. I think that you can see similar results with Ronald Jones this weekend. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. I might actually do another video in a little bit tonight, kind of reviewing opportunity reports and talking about that. But for now, it is Wednesday evening, about 6:20. It's about a 20-minute video. I think tomorrow night you can catch me again. I'm going to be I do have all my start-sit charts ready to roll. You can check these out. I'm going to start adding these fantasy points allowed, though, to each column. But all the start-sit charts are ready, and I'm going to review the I think there's 8 or 9 noon games tomorrow, so I'll be going live tomorrow night. Maybe around 5:30 we'll go on tomorrow night. But the start-sit charts are up, thefantasyfellowship.com. I want to thank you for hanging out, and we'll check you out in another video. Thanks. Peace.